Hey guys, this is Podfics, and today we're going to be reading Spider-Man Reborn by Reborn. This is Chapter 24. Bruce fell into his seat in the Batcave after patrol. He waited, watching his children leave the dressing rooms to head for the elevator with their usual energy. It had been a better night tonight, leaving the younger vigilantes still full of energy. Bruce eyed them for a moment, hoping they wouldn't wake Peter with that volume. Any other day, he might have a few words to say about skipping out on patrol for the night, but for once, he let it go. If he was going to do what he needed to tonight, he couldn't have the others getting into it with him. Tim had already made a point to loudly share Peter's adventure of the day with everyone, and it was only a matter of time before one of them decided to try and talk him into organizing future playdates. Once the cave had been emptied, Bruce turned to the back computer. Peter hadn't provided a last name to the girl he met. Either he already knew there would be something if Bruce looked into them, or he left it out by accident. By this point, Bruce knew his son was smarter than anyone gave him credit for. Peter was bright, a genius in his own making. His inventing with Tim only encouraged his already quick mind. Thus also not mentioning the various training lessons he's picked up quickly, since Bruce had put his foot down on vigilante lessons. He knew Peter's learned gymnastics, stealth, and hacking by his siblings, not including the spars he had had with Damien while Bruce had been gone. His son terrified him. Peter Wayne was too much like himself. Alfred had commented on it before too. Of Peter's inquisitive nature and his drive for good, he wants to be a vigilante just like his family. It scares him to think that one day he couldn't just send Peter to bed before patrols. That someday Peter will join them in the streets full of guns and crowbars. The streets with blood, death, full of the worst Gotham could come up with and throw in their faces. Peter was still innocent. He's still a child, and Bruce wasn't ready to see it fall away, as it has for all the others. Peter has a chance at a normal life, and he runs away from it too fast for Bruce to course correct him. Someday, Peter will wear a suit and fight crime, and Batman could only shadow him for so long. He would have to plan new routes before then, ensuring someone was at his side for every night. Bruce wasn't ready for that day. The day Peter took up a mantle and joined the family in the night would be the day that Peter could lose that childish innocence. He would see things and hear things his son should never be near in the first place. Bruce wondered if Alfred had felt that way with him. Bruce had been worse, after all. He had left Gotham itself to learn and train before taking on the face of Batman. He couldn't risk losing Peter in that way, but he also didn't want to watch Peter's smile fade either. Until the day he could no longer keep Peter safe at home, he could do this. He can and will protect Peter the best he knows how, in his normal life. Peter should be safe while living a typical civilian life for as long as possible. Bruce could only protect his children for so long, but they all had come to him with vengeance and fight in their hearts already. Peter didn't need that. Not yet. Not for as long as he could keep him happy and whole. "I can feel you brooding from upstairs," Selena sounded in, sliding up to his right. Bruce hummed, eyeing the screen as it brought up files for every Gwen in the city. She sighed, seeing the screen. "Bruce, I'm doing what I have to," he grunted, avoiding her knowing gaze. Selena would talk him out of this if he met her eyes. She wanted Peter to have more freedom, but she also didn't see what he had. Catwoman worked alone most times as a thief, unless she worked with her friends. She didn't see what dangers could be lurking in those homes that she would otherwise happily send Peter into. He was doing the right thing here. He was protecting Peter the best he could with his tendency for running off. "Why don't you meet them organically? Bruce, why hide in the basement to do all of this?" She sighed dramatically, her arm draping over his shoulders. "Come to bed, darling." "I will, after I know who they are." He has his reasons for knowing everything he can before entering a room. Selena understood at once. "You know why." "I do. I understand, but think about this from Peter's perspective. Do you really want him to be as paranoid as you when he grows up? Not trusting anyone ever?" She leaned forward, meeting his eyes despite Bruce's attempt to turn away. "Not trusting his own family?" Bruce could hear the accusation in her tone. How he always prepares for the worst, and how he comes off at times with his kids. "I trust my family." "Am I talking about you?" Selena pushed off the arm of the chair, walking a few steps towards the elevator. "Gwen isn't a problem. Try just this once, Bruce, to accept Peter's new friend as a regular parent." He eyed the extended hand, considering her words carefully. Was it so bad that he was protective of his youngest son? Peter fell for any smile, trusting people out of the goodness of his heart. Bruce only wants to keep Peter safe from seeing past those smiles into something darker. He only wants Peter to grow up the way he wished he had, a family together with both his parents at his side. He doesn't want Peter to face the trials Bruce picked up in the name of protecting the city. The dangers and the pain. Peter shouldn't have to face it. He can hold off on learning the history and actions of Gwen's family for now, but he couldn't leave Peter entirely without a shadow, especially whilst he's grounded. His son was a little too good at slipping away. Sighing, Bruce accepted Selena's hand. While Peter was grounded, he found a new way to make the most of it. Currently, that new way included pestering Lucius Fox. His dad's attempt to keep Peter from trying to escape the manor led to him being brought to Wayne Enterprises. While his dad left for meetings, Peter was put under Tim's supervision, who passed him off to Mr. Fox. Now Peter trailed the man in a state-of-the-art lab while pointing out any mistakes or improvement he noticed. That doesn't have to be so big. Peter pointed to a large box. The schematic showed the box was meant to be a portable heater, but Peter doubted anyone would willingly carry a boombox around just for some heat, even if Mr. Freeze turned Gotham into the North Pole. "It'll be smaller before we release it, Peter," Mr. Fox says, taking Peter by the shoulders to lead him further away from the table. "Your dad tells me you're interested in inventing. Why don't you have fun at this table, far from everyone else who has work to finish?" Grinning, Peter ran towards the table. There was a random assortment of metals, wires, and tools, all organized in labeled boxes for him to pull from. Peter climbed into the chair for a better view as he put together the idea on what he could make. The webs he had used accidentally with the red, with Jason, weren't strong enough for him to swing on. He tried testing them in his room and discovered that they were much stickier than anything he could remember. He could always use those to trap criminals while creating other webs to swing on. He would need smaller materials to just make the web shooters, though. Making a suit would be too obvious. Mr. Fox might tell his dad if he tried making his own suit just yet. Maybe Jason would like something new. A mask like Mr. Stark that allowed him to see maps and search up the profiles of whatever ring or gang he breaks up would make his nest easier and maybe a little safer. Jason hadn't been working with any of the other bats at night, and Peter didn't want him entirely alone. Plus, he could add Stark to it so he could contact Peter if he needed backup. Peter pulled out some wires, grinning at his new project filled his mind. His dad couldn't be mad that he was making something for his brother. Tim groaned, pushing himself from the desk before heading towards the door. He spent more time on the merger than he planned to. Hopefully Lucius hadn't gotten chased off by Peter. Tim had tried bartering with Bruce about leaving Peter with Jason or Pamela if he wanted Peter to be grounded outside the manor walls. Whatever Selena had said to him must have struck a chord since he started dragging Peter to work. Still, it left the nearly 8-year-old with too much time on his hands in a large building and nothing to do. Bruce had been clear that Peter wouldn't have free rein, if only to keep him from accidentally setting a fire or interfering with the employees. So far, Tim hadn't heard of any fires, so maybe it was working. He left in search of Lucius, hoping to find Peter doing something calmly and quietly. He knew his brother well enough that he doubted it, but it was a nice thing to hope for. "Hey Lucius, where's Peter?" Tim frowned when he entered the main labs. Peter should be at his side, or at least somewhere clearly visible within the spacious place. He didn't spot the bright yellow signal hoodie Peter wore for the day. The kid was adorable before he could mouth off, Lucius snorted, leaving the table he had been looking over. "Still, cute, but damn, he's more of a lab goblin than you are. I had to give him his own lab on floor B3E. He's working on things that are above clearance level on the employees here." What the hell was Peter working on now? Tim sighed, following Lucius back to the elevator. "Just tell me you didn't leave him there alone." "Of course not. He might be below ground, but I'm fairly sure he'd find a way to tear through the building from there. I called in Lucas to watch him while he's home for the summer." "How's he doing?" "Bruce said he's working on an engineering degree now." Tim hummed, watching the countdown to Peter's floor. "Still fighting, if that's what you mean," Lucius sighed. "But his grades are great, so I can't say much about anything else there." Tim nodded along absent-mindedly. He didn't believe in the superstitions of crossing your fingers for luck, but he hoped in the moment that maybe it had some truth to it. Lucas wouldn't let Peter blow anything up, right? The ding announced their arrival as the doors slid open. Tim stepped out immediately, subtly rushing towards the door with his badge already in hand. The moment he and Lucius passed through the lab doors, Tim saw just what he had been dreading. Peter hung in Lucas's arms, his face covered in soot and his hair blown into spikes, but his original yellow hoodie was now black and singed. The table was smoking, and a small chunk of metal lay flat in the center with a blowtorch nearby. Foam covered half of it, and the chair where a fire extinguisher rolled by their feet. "I have other things to get to. Good luck," Lucius laughed, leaving back out of the room behind them. Tim closed his eyes for a moment, reminding himself that this was Bruce's idea, and so it was his fault. "Do I want to know?" "I knew what I was doing," Peter whined from his aerogel arms flailing in exasperation. "Pretty sure 7-year-olds aren't supposed to use blowtorches, Squirt," Lucas added. Peter wasn't allowed in the labs at Wayne Enterprises anymore. It really wasn't his fault. He was just trying to add a bomb into the mask like Jason said he had in his current one. He thought Jason would like it if that piece was in the new mask. Maybe he should have just put a taser in it instead. "Can we go out? Please?" Peter groaned, sliding off of Cass's bed. Not a chance. Condiment King escaped, and I'm not getting assigned to him for patrol. Steph shivered. We can do a lot here. Let's go swimming. Peter pouted, crawling onto the ceiling. He already swam with Dick and Damien before. He didn't want to go back to the pool already. What did he used to do before? He was an only child. How did he survive that? He couldn't remember anymore. The only thing he knew now was that he wanted to do something. Gwen, Cass spelled out, smiling up at Peter. Steph squealed, patting Cass's shoulder and nodding. Yes, tell us about her. What about a water balloon fight? Peter groaned, hoping to move past that conversation. He's hidden on the ceiling of the closet to avoid Dick and his dad's attempt at them. Tim had helped him make a water gun after he blew up Jason's new mask as an apology for telling everyone about Gwen. He hadn't had a chance to test it out yet, and anything was better than talking about girls. Fine, Steph grinned. Girls against boys. Find yourself a partner, little buddy, 'cause you're going down. Peter barely dropped to the bed before the girls were out of the room. Hey, that's cheating! Scrambling off the bed, he raced out of the room to find any of his brothers to drag into the fight. Steph and Cass already disappeared from the hallway, but Peter's focus was on searching for a brother first. He grabbed the water gun he had stashed in his room before rushing towards the closest heartbeat he could hear. The door swung open to Alfred picking up laundry. Want to play with us? Peter had decided Alfred had to be a god to handle this family. He'd be the perfect partner. Plus, Steph and Cass wouldn't want to throw water balloons at Alfred, so he would be safe. I appreciate the offer, Master Peter. Alfred eyed the water gun with a raised eyebrow. I hope you plan to carry out this war outside the manor, as I have work to get done inside. Yes, sir, Peter pouted before turning to rush for the next heartbeat. Tim would still be at work with his dad. Dick would be at work too, but Dick and Damien had to be here, right? He saw them at breakfast. The next heartbeat was Duke's. Peter found him sleeping at his desk, his dad forcing him to stay home after pulling a double on patrols the previous night. Peter groaned, realizing he couldn't drag him into the game. Dang it. His sense warned him of something incoming just as Peter's body reacted. He crouched on the ceiling, staring at the stain as yellow plastic exploded against the wall where he stood by a second earlier. Crap! I forgot about the Peter tangle. Steph cursed, sprinting down the hall as Peter aimed his gun after her. 2 blue pellets hit Steph's back, soaking her hair and clothes before she had turned out of sight. Serves her right. He really needed to find a partner to join him. I believe I had asked you to refrain from playing with water within the manor, seeing as none of us are Atlanteans. Alfred stood before the couch, the eyebrow of doom raised as he lectured the 3. Peter sat between Steph and Cass, left without a partner during the game since Damien had snuck off to Metropolis. Peter curled into his blanket, his teeth chattering at the cold as the water soaked him to the bone. He could barely listen to Alfred, focusing more on staying awake. Cass was the driest of the 3, but Peter had managed to catch her twice, thanks to his senses. We're sorry, Alfred, Steph pouted, blinking up at the butler. Peter was bored. Yes, I believe most chaos occurs when Master Peter is kept unoccupied, Alfred sighed. Perhaps he does not have enough chores to entertain him. What do you think, Master Peter? Peter blinked when an elbow nudged his side. What? He was cold. So cold. Why was he so cold? A memory of winter in New York hung like a carrot on a stick in his mind. Vaguely he could recall falling asleep on rooftops, buried under fraying blankets and holding on to hand warmers. He needed the sun, maybe. Spiders need the sun, don't they? Master Peter? Pete? A hand gently shook his shoulder. Peter leaned towards the warmth, curling close to the source. That's what a spider needs. Warmth. Yeah, this is better. He could just take a little nap. What do you mean? Peter frowned, staring at Tim's room, where boxes filled the space. The shelves were empty, all the science books and textbooks stuffed in whatever box Tim placed them in. The drawers were opened as Tim moved to push them in even more boxes. The words his brother said earlier just didn't make sense. Peter! Tim pushed more clothes into a box before crouching in front of him. I'm moving. I'll still visit, I promise. It's just gonna be like Dick living in Bloodhaven. You won't even notice I'm gone. But he will. Peter notices every time Dick leaves to stay in Bloodhaven, and he calls him every night. He notices when his dad is gone for too long visiting the watchtower, or when his mom leaves for a girls' trip with Miss Quinn and Dr. Isley. Every time someone leaves, Peter tracks it. He marks the calendar, and he watches the clock till the day they come back. But why was Tim leaving? If he was staying in Gotham, why should he leave them? Why? Peter tried to stabilize his voice, his throat closing up while he fought the tears. Why are you leaving? No, Peter, don't cry. Tim pulled him in a hug, his hands holding him tightly. It's just time for me to be on my own. I can't live here forever. Yes, you can. You can live here forever and ever. You can't leave, Tim. Peter pushed away from Tim, his fight against the tears lost. His cheeks felt wet as Peter sniffled. Please don't leave. I can fix it. I can leave you alone, Or I can help you at work, but please don't go. Peter wiped at his eyes, rubbing at them to get rid of the tears that obscured his vision. Why was Tim leaving? Did he want more space? Did he need silence? Peter still had his headphones made for his senses. They were perfect because that's what Tim wants. Peter, Tim sighed, his hand holding onto Peter's shoulder. Come on, kitten. Celine entered the room, frowning at the pair. Peter ran straight for her, sobbing into her chest. He had to fix this. He will. He'll bring Tim back too. He'll fix this. Let's leave Tim to finish up here, okay? The day after Tim moved out, Peter found himself by the abandoned house again. He tried hiding the boxes, but Dick and Duke found them quickly. When he tried sticking to Tim, his mom managed to pull them apart. Peter hated that no one tried to stop it. No one tried to keep Tim at home. Maybe he did just want his own space, but why couldn't that be later? Peter wasn't ready for them to leave. Stuff was over every day. Would she stop coming now? Who's gonna leave next? Peter was too young to follow them, to visit on his own. Not to mention being grounded meant he wasn't allowed out anymore. Something seems to be troubling you, Peter. The woman spoke, startling Peter. He turned, seeing her face for the first time. Her hair wasn't black like he had first thought, but a dark brown. Peter noticed the same eyes that Damien had, sharp and green. Her clothes were different too, a strange symbol over the chest he faintly recalled seeing on some of Damien's old clothes. I'm fine. Peter wiped his eyes again, glaring up at her. He didn't want to talk to anybody today. He just wanted to be alone. I see that. Have you thought about my proposition? She didn't move any closer, but Peter still took a step towards the broken doorway. He could hear the heartbeat of the other people hiding in the forest. He really hoped she wouldn't kidnap him. She offered to teach him to fight before. Maybe if he learned how to do that, Tim would come back. Yeah. Peter glanced at the trees when one of the hiding people shifted on a branch. Looking back at the woman, he saw her look at the trees too. Her eyes went as cold as Damien's had been when he first came home. Maybe the woman who made Damien so cold wasn't a good teacher. He didn't know why Damien left her, but he didn't trust her. I'll learn by myself. Oh? And how will you do that? She crossed her arms, looking down at Peter. You will only be sloppy and ill-trained at best. At worst, you'll be dead. I can make you the perfect little hero. Maybe your brothers will come back if you can protect them properly. Will that really happen? Peter wanted to protect them, but he couldn't do it when his family lives apart from each other. If he was as good as Damien, though, he could do it. Tim would feel safe at home. Jason and Tim wouldn't have to worry about the Joker. He didn't want to trust her, but if he just learned, it shouldn't hurt, right? Okay, but I gotta go back now. His dad would track him down if he isn't there when he comes home from work. Of course. I'll see you in a week then. Ensure no one follows you. She turned to walk to the trees, stopping a few steps away. By the way, you may call me Talia. Being grounded had to be the worst thing to happen this summer. His dad had tried to take him to Wayne Enterprises, which ended in Peter setting off a bomb in the lab. Steph was assigned babysitting duty and ended up discovering Peter's lack of thermoregulation while soaking the house in water. Then Tim left. Tim and Jason lived in Gotham, but Peter couldn't see them now that they both left. Now his dad left him with Barbara to watch him, if only to keep Peter from wandering too far in the forest alone. Peter knew he had to figure out how to go there to meet Talia in a few days. It was harder since he's been grounded. Alfred would notice if he left his necklace in his room, or if he went into the woods without shoes. Peter wandered the shelves while Babs worked on the computer at the front desk. He thought over how to go back to the abandoned house while staring at the spines of books. She worked at Gotham Library, meaning Peter now had access to all the books inside it. Except, Peter has all the books he would be interested in. The few interesting ones caught his eye, but they almost felt childish when he had more important things to worry about. He walked down the science aisle, craning his head back to read the spines. Nothing seemed new that he hasn't read already or learned from Tim. The library's walls stretched high, and a second floor and a skylight above. Babs said he wasn't allowed on the second floor, but she never said anything about the ceiling. Peter found an empty corner where he started his climb. The library was fairly empty, allowing Babs to spend more time on the comms during work hours, for Duke, who had gone out earlier that day for his patrol. He could hear her rolling to the back room already. Peter crawled upwards, keeping an eye out for anyone who would see him. Up from the ceiling, Peter could spot a few people visiting the library. An elderly woman stood by the health section. A couple perused through the romance shelves, and a few kids were by the table far to the left. Crawling further along, Peter spotted a Gothic high schooler looking over ghost stories as an idea wormed its way in his mind. A great way to waste time until his dad came to get him. Peter crept closer before landing lightly on top of the shelf. He crouched further from sight as he listened to the pages being flipped through. That won't work. Peter deepened his voice, mimicking Batman's rough gravel, just as the girl shrieked. He ducked lower as the girl dropped the book and ran. Giggling, Peter crept further down the aisle, following another kid who looked at history books on the other side. Oh, I'm on page 63. Peter changed his tone again, adding an old Midwestern accent as the boy below cursed loudly. He watched as the back of the kid's head disappeared around the side of the shelves, following the trail from before. Peter continued down, changing his voice with every visitor who bolted for the door when they didn't spot anyone nearby. He managed to scare off 5 people before he heard the near-silent roll of wheels on carpet as Babs came back from the back room. "Peter?" Babs didn't raise her voice as she rolled further into the area. Closing in near the shelves, Peter crouched above. "Want to tell me why everyone's disappeared?" Grinning, Peter flipped off the shelf. As his feet landed on the ground, he immediately fell into a roll just as Dick taught him. Peter beamed, pulling back slightly to stand in front of Babs with his arms outstretched. "I don't know," Peter grinned. Peter gave his best innocent expression, grinning all the while. It wasn't his fault he couldn't find a book to occupy himself while stuck in the library. He had read a little when he first came in, but now he just wanted to do something. "Come on, you can reshuffle the books if you're so bored." Babs smiled, sighing good-naturedly at his antics. Peter doubted she would really get mad at him, especially since he's been working with Tim so that Stark could be used during patrols to help her. Tim needed to add a lab to his apartment, but until he could get the items needed, he would be returning to the cave. This also would hopefully help ease Peter's anxiety if Tim visits so soon since he moved out. The lab was blessedly quiet for once. Peter, kept occupied by Damien and Titus at the dog park today, left the lab free for Tim to work on other projects, one of which being further attempts at recreating the mixture that gave Peter powers. He hadn't had the metagene. Neither Bruce or Selena carried that in the first place. Even now, Peter still wasn't genetically a meta. The change that led to Peter's blood merging with the toxins and the spider he mentioned was not anything close to what Tim could have ever imagined. He couldn't say he hated it, since Peter might not have survived if it didn't manifest into powers, but still, how did he even turn this way? Peter has always been different. Tim hadn't questioned Peter's spurts of maturity since it was usually eclipsed by whatever trouble he ended up causing just as soon. He still doesn't question Peter much other than the more commonly raised issues of Peter's clairvoyance. He guessed each family's death as wrong and proved it eventually when said death came out to be a lie, or in Jason's case, resurrected. Peter always said it was belief and hope, but Tim knew just having faith in something didn't automatically make it true. He could hope his parents were safe and sound, but it didn't change the fact of the matter. This was all before the Joker, too. Tim peered into the microscope, flicking past the strength to peer at the cells better. There had to be an answer somewhere in here. Science always brought out answers, and when it didn't, the right machine just wasn't invented yet. Did he sneak in here while the house is empty? Dick mused, swaggering into the lab in gym clothes. Tim spared a glance at him, noting Dick must have just left the gym before coming to bother him. And somehow people still come in here. Sighing, he pushed back from the sample before turning to the computer. He'd find the answers soon enough. "I thought we could talk." Dick hopped onto the counter on the other side of the computer, peering down at the screen. "Jason's return hit you hard, and now you're living alone. How are you holding up, Tim?" Tim had tried to pretend none of it bothered him. Hell, he even took Peter to spend the day with Jason. That's how he's doing. "I'm fine." Jason hasn't come around the house since that night, as far as Tim could tell. Peter might be grounded, but Tim knew that wasn't stopping him. Mostly helped by Tim himself, but the others wouldn't be too far in letting Peter see his brother. Bruce might think he's protecting Peter, but it was obvious to everyone that the youngest wouldn't be stopped if he really wanted something. Sometimes it was better to knowingly lead them into the chaos with the people watching their back rather than letting Peter sneak out as he has been. Selena had gotten into Bruce about his attempt at sheltering Peter, backfired into her kitten wandering the streets alone, Bruce. And now living alone, Tim found it so quiet. He was used to it once when he was a kid. His parents left him home alone so often that the silence was comforting. After Bruce found out he was alone at home, Tim started living in Wayne Manor. It was quiet sometimes, but once Peter got out of his hate for him, Tim hadn't really known silence. He got used to a child demanding to read or asking to learn to fight. He got accustomed to focusing past light-hearted arguments over movies or cookies, of Peter demanding one thing or another from whichever sibling was caught fighting or ignoring their needs. Hell, Tim had half expected Peter to show up when he hadn't gone to bed the night before. It was lonely a lot of the time, but his apartment never had the Red Hood sitting at the table. He just needed to get used to the silence again. "Right. You know we're all here for you if you wanted to talk, though." "Thanks, Dick. I'm fine. Promise." Tim tried for a smile, turning back to the screen after a moment. He would be fine, eventually. The streets glittered like diamonds when night finally rolled around. The unexpected downpour earlier that evening left the streets to shine brightly against the burning light of the lampposts and nearby windows. These moments were always the best. The surprisingly quiet moment before night fully took over, The peace as civilians settled in their homes with family and criminals prepared for the night, in the safety of their dens. Those were the times where Selena found herself settling on the rooftops of Gotham. For the first couple of years after the birth of her Peter, she chose to back away from the dangers of Gotham and focus her time on her newborn son. She took to crafting plans for her friends in the safety of their homes before returning to her own, watching over the city from the cave while her son slept in the manor above. Eventually, Peter was old enough to be watched by Alfred, while she slipped out to her own tasks and plans. Still, her goal has shifted entirely to Peter. She couldn't take high risks, but as a thief of her caliber, there wasn't much risk to be found. Not when the Bat himself couldn't harm her, not with their shared son and home waiting for them both. Still, tonight was not about treasure or chase. Crime Alley did not carry the same skyline as Gotham proper did. The city itself was beautiful, but the buildings here were a sign of the blight that festered. The worn buildings brought upon cracks to the facade of peace. The taunting glow of the city ahead taunting Crime Alley, showing off its splendor against the ratty buildings cropping out from the ground. She had one goal tonight that heavily relied on the Red Hood's appearance. She knew this wayward kitten wouldn't leave her waiting long. "Selena?" She smirked, turning her head to catch sight of the red mask. "Hood." Turning fully, she studied the ex-bird. At first glance, he didn't appear injured. His stance was strong and prepared, though she had no plans of throwing him off any buildings tonight. "Peter won't tell me what you two have been up to before his little ruse was discovered. Care to share what you two have been up to?" She watched his stance, noting immediately to the bare shift in the muscles that was so clearly on display in the tight fit. He was good, clearly trained to hide his tells better than he did before his death. He wanted to learn to fight, only taught him some things. Unlike her paranoid sweetheart, Selena didn't see much harm in Peter learning to defend himself. If her son bulldozed his way into being a vigilante despite Bruce's attempts, then he should know at least to protect himself. She might be a little disappointed that being a thief isn't his end goal, but a vigilante is good enough. At least as long as the birds followed him. Selena figured she should have a talk with her son soon. She should plan for what age he could go out, so that she can prepare for that amount of stress. Peter was unstoppable in his goals, and she loves every inch of that. He would be indomitable, untouchable. Her Peter would be the greatest vigilante once they went out into the night. She just hoped that Peter could wait a few more years. She was not prepared just yet for the pain he would face. She had to be strong herself to help him when he needed it. Heaven knows Bruce's emotional capacity would not be far enough to really help him there. "Good. Friday nights then. Don't tell Bruce." Selena turned, leaping off the roof without waiting for confirmation. She would have Peter continue lessons with Jason for now. Jason wouldn't harm her son, any more than he already has apparently. She will have to talk to the big bad bat to ensure he won't interrupt their lessons any more than he already has. Bruce might be found with accidentally pushing his children away, but Selena refused it. If one parent was so willing to accept the martyr role, then it was up to her to pick up the pieces before they fell. Besides, she has one more stop tonight. Red Robin crouched on the rooftop with the same gargoyle that has seen every new Robin stand in their own place beside Batman. This little bird crouched beside it, taking in the sights of his own, a mark to how far he's grown. Selena landed quietly behind him, her own eyes taking in the city ahead of them. "It's beautiful," she started, walking to his side as Tim stood. "It's dangerous. Seems this little bird really has taken after Batman." She focused back onto the city, watching the flashing lights below. If she focused just that much more, she was sure she could just as easily spot the silhouettes of her adoptive children, swinging ahead of the lights, chasing after the violence with the insurmountable desire to help. Maybe, but life is dangerous. So is family. She glanced at him now. Red Robin was only allowed out now with strict orders to be careful. Selena knew he would be, wrapped up in a bed the moment he got a stab wound or broken bone, so soon after the attack. No matter if he lived elsewhere, Alfred and herself wouldn't let him injure himself or recover alone if they could help it. Wouldn't you agree? Sure. Red Robin watched her, the calculating gaze reminding her so much of Batman and Bruce. Always searching for the play, even with the intention is to help. "Why are you here? My son brings home a wayward murderer who hurt you, and you thought I wouldn't come ask how you are?" Raising an eyebrow, she crosses her arms and focuses her attention on him. Jason had been brought home over a week ago, and Tim has since kept to himself more so than before. Not to mention Tim is choosing to move out days after Jason came and went. He spent time with his siblings, sure, but Selena had to call him to remind him to visit during daytime hours. Peter had been heartbroken since he moved out, and she could only do so much to keep him distracted. Tim turned from her then, looking over at the city again while thinking of a response. She had all night to wait. Alfred and Damien would be watching over Peter tonight. Peter wanted to bring Jason home, he finally decided on. The information left out was too easy to notice. Tim either was losing his touch or was still bothered by the revelation. 7-year-olds can't juggle so many opposing emotions. Would have been easier to hate him otherwise, I'd imagine. She mused carefully, watching his face as she spoke. Peter was well aware of what happened to Tim. That revelation leading him to seek out Red Hood on his own soon after. She still hates the fact that Peter had kept his plans from her, though she could understand it well enough. Didn't mean she couldn't pout about it. Just because Jason came back doesn't mean he loves you any less. Peter has such a big family, and he loves every one of us. Selena continues, taking Tim's gloved hand in hers. Peter understands things a lot better than people give him credit for. You've seen it yourself. Let him talk to you before pushing yourself away completely. Peter's capacity for emotions were not something born from Bruce and his inability to even acknowledge them. He has always been intuitive and bright, always knowing when someone needed to be cheered up. Selena caught him plenty of times when Tim first came back from a stay with the Joker, sitting on guard by his bedside or sitting near enough to ground him when nightmares made Tim too restless. Tim had been near catatonic for a while at first, and Peter refused to leave his side, only bribed by the promise of longer vigils if he went to bed at whatever time she managed to drag him from Tim's room. He loves Jason. Why should he care? It was a question. Selena was sure Tim had his own answers in mind, and none of them were true. Because you're his brother too. You have just as many siblings as he does. Don't forgive Jason if you don't believe it. I haven't forgiven him myself, but I will give him the chance to prove he will be better. Meeting the blue eyes of her adopted son, Selena held it before continuing. Do not forgive someone for the sake of others. Just forgive them when you think they've earned it. Jason hurt you, and he nearly killed you, and I'm not asking you to be his best friend. I'm not even asking you to forgive him and bake a cake together. Just watch. See if he earns that forgiveness, and only if you're ready to. Then you can forgive him. If you never want to forgive him either, that's fine. The choice is yours to make, no one else's. Most parents urge their children to forgive the transgressions of others simply because they're kids who will cause each other problems as they grow up. A thief knows the power of revenge in various forms other than violence the bats and birds dole out. Sometimes forgiveness is not as easily given, and that's okay. The victim does not have to forgive the transgressor. There is another sense of peace to be found by accepting that you can't forgive the other for the harm they've caused. Sometimes people don't change. Sometimes they do. It doesn't equate to deserving the forgiveness from someone who hurt by them initially. If Tim never wanted to forgive Jason, Selena would stand by his choice. He had been hurt by Jason, his safety ruined in the tower forever by that attack. She could understand if he chose not to, and she would have his back should he make that choice. He just needed to know he wouldn't be alone in that decision. Thank you, Selena. He didn't look at her as he spoke, but his words were more than enough of an answer. The nearly choked back words betrayed the cold face he bore, the tightening of his jaw proclaiming to her just what raced through his mind at the moment. Tim would be fine no matter what he chose. Sometimes, even the strongest pillars need support. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 24 of Spider-Man Reborn by Kieran. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.